Hey everybody, it's another Wednesday night here with the Open Shutter crew, and we have a special guest tonight, Jason Foley, who's going to discuss some astrophotography stuff with us. So we'll do the usual, just go around the table, give a quick introduction to everyone, and then we'll get into astrophotography.
Perfect.
I'll start it off here. My name is Bryan McGowan, Brampton-based photographer, videographer, and YouTuber, and I do kind of everything, very random. No niche. I just enjoy making stuff. All right, we'll go to Paul next. We'll save Jason for last, just because he's the special guest. So we'll end with him. There we go.
Perfect info.
Sorry,
you had to do it.
We only use music for like special guests.
Oh, awesome!
And you're a special guest. Thanks everyone for jumping on this Wednesday. Big thanks to Jason for taking the time to chat about his photography. If you guys are into astro or curious about how to start getting into astro, Jason is your man. I'm pretty sure Bryan listed his IG in the chat or wherever we put it.
His
so
IG
make sure you
and
go
his
follow him.
YouTube are listed.
You're local to Brampton, right, Jason?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. So Brampton guys, so it's 1 versus 4 tonight, which is fine. I can handle
Brampton
it.
guys are taking over.
Yeah, slowly taking over.
Man. So I think it's gonna be a pretty cool chat. I don't think we've ever actually talked about astro on this show, so it's cool to like branch out in different styles and niches, because I think people are typically curious about different stuff, and sometimes you don't know where to start, and sometimes it's like pretty easy to start to pick up on stuff. So this show's on Bryan's channel, so make sure you go subscribe to his stuff if you haven't. And these guys below. Jason also has a YouTube channel. And
links below in the description.
If you guys aren't subscribed to me, I don't know what you're doing. So that's about it. Over to Andre. That's all I got.
What's going on, everybody? Andre Vonikish here, also a Brampton photographer, videographer. I do everything from light painting, steel wool, family shoots, weddings. So yeah, basically everything. So short and sweet.
Yeah.
Nice.
You said light painting, so near and dear to my heart there. We'll talk about that.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll get you out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Evans.
What's up? My name is Evans. Also Brampton based. Maybe we should name this the Brampton Boys Show.
The Brampton Boys Show.
I like it. I think that was like a candidate, though. I think it was a candidate for the show, though.
905.
Well, today we can also call it the Canadian show, right? Or the GTA show.
The Canucks.
Because I think all the American boys didn't make it today. So
Dogecoin, man. Dogecoin's going crazy.
Yeah. So I'm based in Brampton, Ontario as well. I mainly shoot weddings and events and portraits. But as you guys know, I also have an open mind to try out stuff. So I've done landscapes. I've done a little bit of light painting with Bryan and Andrea for fun. I've also actually tried astro at night with Bryan and Andrea as well. So
cool.
I'm open-minded to try every genre of photography, because like I always say, if you're a wedding photographer, you need to understand other aspects of photography as well, because wedding combines almost everything, right? So I'm here to learn most of the time, because I've not done much in terms of astro and stuff. So I'm really curious to see what Jason has for us today, and also to learn. So I think it's going to be a fun show.
Excellent.
For sure.
All
right, Jason, why don't you give us a rundown on you?
Yeah, okay. So my name is Jason Foley. I guess I'm a macro, landscape, and astrophotographer. So I dabble in a little bit of everything. I've never done a wedding. I haven't tried that. I'm not brave enough to try that one yet. But I started out really, in the beginning, just taking pictures of airplanes here at Pearson. Actually, I am a Brampton resident as well. And that's kind of what I cut my teeth on. I'm an aviation enthusiast, so you could find me at the airport all the time taking pictures of planes coming into land. But we got a place up north a few years ago, and that really branched out my interest in landscape photography. And then one day I took a close-up picture of a bug, and I was instantly hooked on macro. So I do a lot of macro. And then I kind of turned my sights to the skies and got into astrophotography. So I really touch on a little bit of everything. And photography, I think it's a great hobby, very relaxing. It's a great creative outlet. And recently trying to expand into YouTube as well, trying to get in front of the camera here and talk about what I've learned and see what I can pass on. I've learned a lot through YouTubers, so I think it's a great thing to be able to pay that forward anytime you can. So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah,
Cool.
just for anybody watching, just stay tuned to a future show because we are going to have Jason back for a macro specific show. So we haven't
Live
worked out a
bugs.
date for that yet, but
Going to bring a lot of live bugs. So if
Yes.
you know, I'm kidding. I'll just share photos of
Like
it.
science class.
Yeah, that's right.
Nice.
That's right.
there
Yeah.
we go.
Yeah.
All right, so just maybe just run us through your kind of backyard setup, Jason, just to give people an idea of what you're using to capture the images you're getting.
Sure. Yeah. Well, what I'll do very quickly, I'll just start kind of very quickly from the beginning of things. So initially what I started off with, when I got into Astro, did a little bit of research online, trying to understand what do I need to do to capture images of the night sky. I did a lot of long exposure photography in daylight hours. And essentially that's what astrophotography is taking long exposures of the night sky. I turned to my lens that I had in the bag at the time. It was just a nifty 50, but it was nice and wide. It was a 1.4 aperture on that. And I didn't do anything too tricky. I literally pointed that thing at the sky. I did the longest exposure that I could with it, which was a 30-second exposure. That's the limit of my camera and without going into bulb mode. Nice wide open aperture. I put the 10-second timer on. I took a shot of the night sky and it was absolutely terrible. But the truth is,
We've all been there.
just being honest with you. But what was very apparent very quickly was when I would look at the night sky with the naked eye, you might see a few hundred stars up there, but the image that I did capture, even though it was blurry, there was thousands of stars. It quite literally transformed night into day. It was incredible. So that started really the research and trying to understand, okay, where did I go wrong? I had my lens on a tripod, my camera on a tripod. I didn't touch the camera. What did I do wrong? Well, that's when it kind of came to me. Well, the Earth is spinning. The night sky is constantly moving overhead. And when we look to the night sky, with the naked eye, it looks pretty static. But when you start to use a longer focal length with longer lenses, and you keep that shutter open for an extended period of time, that motion now becomes apparent, and stars can become star trails. So when you're trying to, my type of photography anyways, I'm trying to get pinpoint stars. So that's when I learned about something called the 500 rule. And if some of you may have heard of that before, but the simple rule of thumb is something like this, a 50 millimeter lens. You take the focal length of the lens that you're using and you divide that into 500. So in this case, 50 into 500 gives you 10. 10 is the general length of exposure that you could do before introducing star trails to your image. So that was kind of a game changer for me. So now I would, when using this lens, I would dial that back to a 10-second exposure. I didn't get as much light, but now I had pinpoint stars. So that was a really kind of an aha moment. So from there, I expanded the setup a little bit, and I got a more dedicated astrophotography lens. I shouldn't say that. It's still very much a regular lens. It's not an astro-specific one, but very well known in the astrophotography community, and that's by a brand called Rokinon. And this is now a 14 millimeter lens. It's a 14 f2.8, and using that 500 rule again, I was now able to take 35-second exposures, or again, I limited myself to 30 seconds, which was my camera's limit. But now I'm shooting a much wider scene. I'm now able to get part of the landscape in front of me in the shot, as well as the night sky. So, and again, it's at a very good aperture, f2.8. So I was getting a lot of light into the scene. So that's what I did for the first year or so. I just used that lens, and I was taking 30-second exposures of everything that I could possibly find. And what I wanted to do real quick, if I can, I'm going to share an image here.
Yep.
There we go, Brian.
Okay, I will pop that up here.
So this is one that I would say kind of was the highlight of using this lens after a lot of experimentation over several months. Again, I mentioned that we have a place up north. So this is on a lake that we're on, standing on a fishing dock looking south. This was a 30-second long exposure. And I like to show this one because it really highlights, if you just look at the sky, you can actually see the Milky Way just tucked behind the trees there. But that campfire, that was an individual having a campfire next door on their property. That was a small little fire. But in a matter of the 30 seconds that I had that shutter open, that light painted, and I like the fact that light painting was mentioned earlier. It light painted those trees with that ambient light from the fire. and created what I think to me looks like a painting. And off in the distance on the horizon there, you see the lighting there. That's actually a distant city. That's Peterborough, which is about a 45-minute drive away from where we were. So that's unfortunately showing the nasty side of light pollution, but I think it worked in this photo and it kind of balanced it out. So that's a good example of it.
Cool photo, yeah.
Yeah, and you get the nice.
Just before you move on here, you had mentioned light trails as something you don't normally shoot, like star trails.
Yeah.
But I've got a star trail shot that I can pop up just so people know
the difference.
What you were referring to.
For sure.
Yeah. What was that rule again? The 500 rule?
It's called the 500 rule. So
I'm terrible at math.
So you have two ways to. Well, Bryan can talk about his, for sure, and how he came up with that.
Yeah. So that's actually it's not a single exposure because it was taken in the middle of the city. That's 70 some odd exposures. Yeah, taken over about a half-hour span. So that just tells you how much the stars move within a half-hour period. So it's way more than you'd think.
Yeah.
But that's what a star trail shot looks like, is you just get the streaks from the stars.
Yeah.
And I won't tell you how much Photoshop I had to do to balance out stars with city lights in that one. A lot of Photoshop to balance that out.
There is a lot of post-processing in astrophotography. There is just a reality of that type of photography. Yeah.
Keeps it fun though.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll put your screen back up there for you, Jason.
Okay. So really quickly, then the next one will be the last one I'll show of this particular lens, but it's one of my absolute favorite shots. And I always joke around, if I ever became a rock star, this would be my album cover.
Oh yeah.
So So I call this shot the Three Jasons. This was taken on the same dock as the last photo, but looking eastbound now. This is a single 30-second exposure. So we talk about post-processing. There's no trickery here. This was done in a single shot. The only post-processing I did was I obviously converted the color image to black and white because I like the way it looked in black and white. And then I used the levels to adjust the blacks and the darks and the lights a little bit to give me a little more contrast. So I wanted to talk about this one quickly because I think this is something anybody can try. Yeah. So the way I did this, my tripod was set up on the ground facing the dock. Same lens, 14 mil lens in this case. I had a 30-second exposure dialed into my camera, and I had the 10-second timer program, so I could hit the shutter button, run around in front of the scene before that shutter would open. So I hit the shutter button, I ran around in front, and I got into that center position. Now in the photo, you can see my hands are up in front of me slightly. In my hand, I had a small LED flashlight. It's like a pen light with the switch on the end of it, and the lights were on the side. So for a split second, I would just click, click, and cycle the light on and off. That was long enough to light paint my face. And now that I was back in the dark again, I shuffled to the left side, got in position, click, click, shuffled across to the right side, and did the same thing, did the click on and off. It took me, and I'll be honest with you, it took me about 15 tries to get.
I was going to ask how many times it took you to get.
Oh yeah, it easily took me 15 tries because I have a little bit of OCD. Had to make sure that the spacing was right between the three Jasons. And if I did any kind of movement when I hit that button, I had some blur in the face. So it took me 15 tries or so to get one where it all worked out. Everything was in focus, and it is absolutely one of my favorite shots because of the technical side of it. And so few people believe that I did it in one shot, but it was absolutely in one shot. So I think, and one other thing I find really interesting about it is I'm transparent. And a lot of people ask me, well, how is that possible? We can see through you. And and I finally figured this out. I did a 30-second exposure. So you look at the night sky there, and there's a certain tone to it, a certain darkness to it. Well, I stood in each position probably for about 5-6 seconds. So that means that part only had about 24 to 25 seconds of that light coming from behind it. So it actually created a perfect silhouette of three of me. Yeah. And when I wasn't in each of those positions, the starlight was able to get to the sensor. So it created three transparent Jasons. So yeah, one of my favorites. And if you look in the upper left side here over my right shoulder, that's Andromeda.
Can you zoom that in a little bit?
That little smudge that you see there. And so I find that really cool because that's a bit of foreshadowing, because Andromeda ended up being my first deep sky target that I shot a couple of years after this image. So Yeah, so that's very cool.
Man.
Um,
So what would the name of your album title here be? I think.
I got nothing. I really got nothing.
It's
It might
pretty-
be I
it's
got
pretty-
nothing, actually. Yeah.
I got nothing.
That
I got
would
nothing
work.
except for stars.
And so this one here, again, Bryan mentioned about doing multiple photos and blending them together. That's exactly the technique that I used in this one. Same lens on a tripod. I shot about 15 images. The Milky Way moved a little bit with each image. I used a program called Sequitur. It's free that you can find online. And what it does is you import all 15 photos to it. You designate which part of the photo was sky and which part was the terrain in front of you, and it will stack them separately. So blends the sky and makes it crisp, and it blends the foreground and also brings sharpness and detail there as well.
Ooh.
So great program for
Sequitur.
So if you don't have a tracker, if you want to do tripod based wide exposures like that, give that one a try. It's really cool. So really quickly, I'll come out of there for a second, actually, Bryan, if I can.
Yep.
So I was just going to show really quickly then kind of the next lens that I got, which really touches on the last photos I'll show you. This is the Sigma 150 to 600 mil. Really, it's known for wildlife photography. I don't think people think of this lens as an astrophotography lens, first and foremost. I bought it to do shots of the moon. I saw somebody on YouTube that had used this lens to take lunar images, and I was like, I have to try that. So at 600 mil with this lens, I'll go back to that shot real quick now. You can take images like this with that type of lens. And I started out originally doing single images, taking one shot. They were good, but there was quite often a bit of a blurriness to them. And there's atmospheric distortion that we have to deal with, unfortunately. And if you've ever looked at the moon through a telephoto lens and looked at it on the live view on the back, you can actually see that distortion. You can actually see it's essentially turbulence in the air that will cause ripples. If you think of when you look at hot concrete and you see the ripples coming up from it, it's kind of like that, and it will obscure your shot of the moon. By taking multiple images of the moon, in my case, I'll usually take anywhere from 50 to 100 of them. You can then bring that into post-processing software. Something like Registax is one that is a really common one. Photoshop will do it as well. It'll preserve the sharpest parts of each of those images so that when it brings it all together, you have a nice, detailed, sharp image of the moon. And this one, it turned out pretty good. There's actually quite a bit of detail in the craters and stuff like that.
Damn.
And that's just done with a telephoto lens. It's not a telescope. It's a lens that a lot of people use for wildlife. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Nice.
Nice.
I would have thought this kind of shot was only possible with the telescopes, because I know people put their cameras at the end of the telescopes
Sure.
to get that magnification, but to do that with just the 600 millimeter lens, that's pretty cool.
And what a lot of people do, they shoot video actually of the moon, which is interesting. When you think about it, if you can shoot 4K video at 30 frames per second, you're getting a lot of frames. So even though I'll do 100 images, still images, apparently shooting video is an even more effective way, because a lot of I think Registax, there's another one called Auto Stacker. They'll actually take the individual frames of a video file and stack them and get even better results. So in many cases, you may even want to try that. Try shooting video of the moon and importing it into some of these programs to see what you can get with it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So just tell us what camera you use, Jason.
Yeah, sorry, of course. Yeah, I'm using a Canon EOS R.
So it's nothing specialized at all.
No, it's not Astro Modified. And when I say Astro Modified, some people will do that with older cameras. They remove a filter that's on the sensor that's actually there to block out, I want to say it's infrared light. And so I could take my EOS R to a specialist that'll take that filter off, and I can now see much more detail in nebula and stuff like that. But it kind of wrecks the camera for daytime photography. So I'm not really prepared to do that. But no, so this is a stock camera. That's what I always like to stress. All of these images that I've done are with stock camera gear. They're not Astro specific. I have some Astro specific equipment I use now, but none of, up until this point, none of it was. So did you have any questions, guys, or can I jump to the next part? I keep going. So
No,
Okay,
that's okay.
get
So
fired
does
off
anyone have any
in the chat.
questions? And yeah, if anyone has any questions for Jason in the chat too, we're keeping an eye on that. So if you ask a question, we'll fire it off to Jason for you there too.
Okay, perfect. What I want to touch on now then real quick before I show the next image. So this is again a 600 mil lens. Now if we go back to that 500 rule that I talked about earlier, at 600 millimeters, you divide 600 into 500, I only get about a 0.8 of a second, 0.8 of a second exposure before I'm going to introduce star trails. So this isn't good for deep sky objects, and that's where I kind of turn to the next thing. So late last summer, I decided to buy an equatorial mount, a star tracker essentially. And what that allows, and I'll hold it up actually right now, it's right here. So this is called a Sky Guider Pro. And the purpose of this device is you mount it to the top of your tripod. This here through the middle is a scope, which I align with Polaris, with the North Star. Then this here actually rotates. This whole thing will rotate and match the speed of the Earth's rotation. So when I mount my camera and assembly to this, now I can go from, so again, using this example here with this one where without a tracker, I'd be limited to less than a second. I can now shoot 60 seconds, 120 seconds. I can get so much more light using this lens to that sensor, and I can avoid star trailing, which is really a game changer. And that's what I did last fall. And I'll show, if you don't mind me sharing again here.
Of course, that's what you're here for. So.
Yeah.
Blowing my mind, Jason. Blowing my mind.
I know, really.
I'm like, what's
I'm
happening
giving you the whole
right
screen
now?
here. So.
There you go.
There we go.
I'm just trying to get a tripod that doesn't
Jack says it's high time we bring the fire extinguisher here.
Yeah.
Pictures are hot.
Yeah.
So,
that's crazy.
So this shot, this is my first deep sky object that I ever shot, and this is Andromeda. And last, I want to say it was in late September, early October, was when I really got a pretty good handle on how the equatorial mount worked. And I had a nice dark night there in one of the last open weekends at our cottage up north. And I managed to get this image of Andromeda. And this is about,
it flickering.
it's about, oh, is it flickering?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't I try? I'll stop it for a second.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why don't we try again?
Okay. Yeah, we actually want to see it instead of just watching it flicker here.
I felt like I was in space. Yeah.
There we
Better?
go. That's better.
Okay.
There you go, guys.
Wow.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize it was
No,
flickering.
that's okay. It's okay.
So yeah, this is 2.5 million light years away.
So awesome.
Absolutely massive galaxy, and it was. I always tell people about my experience when I captured this image. I literally, when I saw it on the back of my camera on the screen, I literally jumped around. I was so excited.
That's what we call a
I don't
banger.
blame you.
Jason.
I was
This is a
just blown
banger.
away. Now, full disclosure, it did not look like this on the back of my camera. It was quite the washed out scene, but you knew that it was there. You can see the outline of it.
You knew it. Yeah.
You knew you got it.
You knew it. Yeah.
And this was about 8 shots. So we keep going back to that stacking thing that's very common with astrophotography. I only managed to get 8 shots of this. I took 15, but I still had some star trailing. And but I was still able to blend the 8 that I had and arrive at this image. Now, there's something else that I won't get too much
I'll be
into,
right
but
back, guys.
you can actually modify your setup even further with something called auto guiding. And auto guiding is almost like mounting a small telescope to the side of your camera assembly. And with that, you lock onto a star and you use software. And what it does is it can detect any of that. I should touch on something called periodic error. See, I jump around all the time, guys. This is a great device, but it's not perfect. Inside of this device, it's geared. And as those gears are turning, sometimes they can mesh together, not quite perfectly, and they can cause a little hiccup, if you will, a little pause in the tracking. And they call that periodic error. So with this lens, when I first started this, I was able to get, like I said, 60 seconds up to 120 seconds exposures, but I was discarding about half of the images because I would still get that occasional error. Auto guiding with that additional scope that's on the side, and there's a small little camera at the back, that allows me now to lock onto a star, and it uses the star as a reference. So it can detect with the star whether there's some periodic error that it's experiencing and send a pulse to the tracker to say, speed up a little bit or slow down a little bit.
Oh, man.
And
Really?
now my auto guide, or now my tracking, I can go from not only 60 seconds to 120 seconds exposure, but now I can do 3 minutes, 5 minutes. The really good ones can do as long as 10 minutes or more. So that was really the next step in my journey with astrophotography, was auto guiding. I haven't had a ton of experience with that yet. I've done a few images from the backyard here in the spring just to get the technique down, and I'll be trying that out more this summer. But images like this of Andromeda, I'm hoping I'll get more data on it and be able to improve on it even more.
So, Jason, I'm shooting an EOSR as well. So,
yeah.
Are you shooting full frame, or are you in the crop factor?
Full frame.
Okay.
Yeah, 100% full frame. Yeah.
So you're not setting the crop to gain more on the lens then?
No.
Or you don't need to.
Well, you want to retain as much resolution as you can as well, right? And I've never once used the crop factor on my lens, or on my camera, so forgive me. But I believe essentially all that's doing is doing an in-camera zoom, a crop essentially.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to give up megapixels if I do that, right? So full frame, I've always just used full frame.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I inevitably, you almost always have to crop in a bit on some of these targets. I did one recently of the Whirlpool galaxy, which was so small. I cropped into probably, maybe what was left was maybe a 5 megapixel image out of the thing, but it was enough to still see detail.
Okay.
But no, you want to use that resolution as much as you can, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Whenever you use that crop sensor, my camera does it as well, but it's a 24 megapixel camera I have. When you use it in APS-C mode, you're left with like 12 megapixels.
Right.
And then you're gonna have to crop back in, so you're gonna be having less data to work with. So.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a use case for that mode. I hear a lot of people that use that crop factor to get that extra reach. I just like to do it in post, essentially, type of thing. So,
I cheated a few times for like wildlife.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't use it.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I don't think I know how to turn it on my camera. I should admit that.
Yeah, I've used it. I use it mostly in video.
Yeah.
Sure. When I'm shooting 4K video, that crop, you don't lose any quality in video, right? In 4K especially.
Yeah, I shoot any video I've done. Actually, I've done in 1080. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't want the file sizes of 4K. I'm not there. I'm not there yet. Yeah. So the next one I'll show real quick was kind of the last image I captured in the fall before kind of closing up for the season. This is the Orion Nebula. So same setup though. Use the 600 mil, use the tracker. This one I got about 15 images, I believe, on it. Out of, I think I had close to 30. I had, again, to discard about half of them because I wasn't using auto guiding at that point. But really, really happy with the way this one turned out. It's one of my favorites so far. And this is called the Running Man Nebula up here, which kind of looks like a running man. Yeah.
Kinda, yeah. Weird.
Yeah. Huh? So very, very cool.
What's like the general like geography of all these galaxies? Like what's like the closest one to like the furthest one? Like what's the
Oh my goodness.
Well, the major ones, I guess, was the
question. So Andromeda is 2.5 million light years away. 2.5 million light years away. The Whirlpool galaxy that I just photographed was 10 times that. It's 25 million light years away. I mean, it's what that really means to us in the grand scheme of things, other than the fact that what I'm witnessing actually took place 2.5 million years ago or 25 million years ago, because that's how long it's taken the light to get to us, right? So it kind of makes you a time traveler, actually, in some respect, when you're able to look at the night sky like that.
So awesome.
Yeah, it's very, very, very cool. So the last one I'll show you, that's my setup. So we talked in the very beginning about the setup. So this one here, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So there, of course, there's my Sigma lens, my EOSR. There's my tracker. And you can see it's an interesting thing when you set this up that the tracker is quite the sensitive device. You actually will use a counterweight to make sure that it's well balanced, because if you don't have it well balanced, that can affect your tracking. It's a cable management nightmare, as you can see. This device here is a really neat one, and this is called an ASI Air Pro. It's basically a mini computer. If you've heard of Raspberry Pi, which I think exists in a lot of little Android boxes, it's kind of the hardware that's driving some of those cable boxes that you can get. That's essentially what's in this. It's just a mini computer, and you tether it to a smartphone or a tablet, and that's the software that drives the tracking mount, and then this little scope over here, that's the auto guiding camera that I talked about on the other side there. It looks like a little mini telescope. So the ASI Air is the brains that keeps everything going and does what's called auto guiding, and helps me get long exposures. And then I use external power. This is just a little power tank here for power when I'm out in the field.
Nice.
And this is a homemade, I guess almost like a spreader that you'd call it, just to add structural rigidity, because I'm using a tripod that I've been using for landscape photography and everything else. Not really an Astro specific one. Doesn't have a lot of weight to it. So that wood base is heavy as anything, and it's mounted very firmly to the tripod legs, and it just gives me that extra stability, because you want that. You don't want any camera shake introduced.
No.
So, yeah. But that's how I do what I do, guys. Yeah.
Man.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I don't know if you have any
images.
questions there. Turn that off. There you go.
Hey, does anyone watching have any questions for Jason? Any guys in the show have any questions?
What's your next piece of gear that you want to get?
Oh gosh, I don't think I'm allowed to get any more.
No.
Do you know what, honestly? A good answer, right? With the with this setup here, I think this has a lot of legs. I think I'll be able to use this through this year for sure. I was mentioning earlier off the call that I'm doing it, I don't want to say the old school way, but I'm doing it the hard way. So, you know, when you learn theory before you actually get to the practical stuff.
Yeah.
My tracking mount doesn't have something in it called a go-to feature. Now, when you get into the larger mounts, and some of these mounts can weigh 30, 40 pounds just for the mount, and they can hold a payload of 50 to 60 pounds of equipment. These things are absolutely massive. One of the benefits of those things is that they have a go-to feature where I could simply say, I want to photograph the Orion Nebula, and I key in the Orion Nebula, and it'll pan the whole thing, center it right up in the middle of the frame, and you just start shooting.
Oh man!
So in one night, with that type of setup,
that could be counted as cheating.
Well, I don't have approval for that expenditure just yet. So, but what I like about this, and some of the photographers that I follow that use that type of equipment, they've actually said that what they miss the most is when they started out like this, because what I use now, mind you, I'm still using technology. I use an app called Sky Safari. There's other ones out there that you can get as well, but they're basically a map of the night sky, but they're quite automated. And I can say, I could decide that tonight I want to photograph the Orion Nebula, and I want to use my 600 millimeter lens. It'll actually create a little overlay over top of Orion in the night sky, so I can see what my framing will look like of Orion. And I may decide, I don't want to shoot it at 600. I want to actually shoot it at 400 because I want it to fill in more of the frame. Like the software we have today is incredible. But what I then have to do is say, okay, well, I know Orion's right there. And let's say, okay, the Big Dipper is right there. And I have to star hop. So I will frame up one of the stars in the Big Dipper, let's say the last one on the handle, in my field of view and on the camera's preview screen at the back. Then I'll look at my app and say, okay, I got to hop 2 stars to the right. So now on my camera, I'll pan very carefully 2 stars to the right. And everything, jumps all over the place at 600 mil, as you can imagine. Everything moves. It's very hard to do. And you literally hop until you find your target. And quite often, you won't see your target because you don't reveal it until you do the long exposure. So you just know that as long as I see that formation of stars in that general area, I'm pretty certain that target's in the middle of it. I'll fire off a test shot, and then I'll see, yep, I've got the target. I'll lock everything down, and then I'll start my tracking process, and I'll start my multiple images. So I'm doing it the old school way, which I actually think is a great way to start.
Yeah. Well, you're understanding what you're doing.
Yeah, and it gives you an appreciation for things, and it forces you to learn the night sky. And I have a lot to learn. I'm by far from an expert, but it's a great thing to take up for sure. Yeah.
So what are you focusing on to get focus?
Oh, you asked a great question, and I don't have it here. So what you do, you use something called a Botnov mask. So, and we'll look that up. You should look that up. But essentially, you'll try to find the brightest star you can find in your field of view, and a Botnov mask is a piece of plastic. It's about yay big around. They come in different sizes depending on the size of the front of your lens, and it has patterns cut into it. And what you do is you place that on the front of your lens, and You then will use your manual focusing, because the autofocus has no use in astrophotography. There's just not enough there for the camera to grab onto. So using your manual focusing ring, that star that's on your preview screen will have almost like crosshairs through it. That's what the pattern on that Botanoff mask does. It creates this crosshair pattern, and you will continually adjust your manual focus, and the crosshairs will actually move like this. And you will get them to the point where they're exactly centered like that over top of your star. That's when you know you've achieved perfect focus. Wow. You take you remember to take the Botanoff mask off, which I'll tell you I've forgotten many times. But you take that mask off, and then you've got good focus. But you typically only have good focus for about an hour or so, because especially when you're shooting in the winter and the temperatures are changing, believe it or not, your focus can change slightly. And I think it's just with the expansion and contraction of the camera lens itself. So I've had an imaging session start off in focus and end out of focus. So it's important that every 45 minutes to an hour or so, you pause, check your focus, and do it again with the Botanoff mask.
Nice. Jack wants to know what motivates you.
Oh gosh, you know what? It's a creative outlet, and I find it very relaxing. It's almost like therapy. I've had this fascination with space for the longest time, but pretty much like everybody else, you look at the night sky and you see the moon and you see stars and a bunch of constellations. So the ability with my own equipment to peer even further and to see objects that are there really for us to see. It's just you have to know how to use your equipment to reveal it. So it's discovery, I guess. And these things, what's funny, these things have been discovered a million times before me. I mean, you can go online right now and Google the Orion Nebula, and you'll find a million images of the Orion Nebula. And you know what? They all look a lot alike. Apart from some artistic expression where people will maybe do a little more saturation and so on. But at the end of the day, that object isn't changing. I mean, it's going to look the same for millions of years. So, but it's the fact that I've been able to capture it.
You got it.
Yeah.
Personal thing. Personal.
That this was my image. And it's just a connection. I can't explain it any other way. And then being able to share that with other people, that's pretty cool.
100%.
What are some dream shots you want to get?
Well, this year, I've actually bookmarked a whole whack of targets in that Sky Safari. Now, I mean, there's things, lots of nebulas that I'd like to photograph. There's the North American Nebula. There's there's all these different named nebulas. They start to get a little trickier with my setup because I don't have that Astro Modified camera. So I'm not going to be able to reveal as much of certain color spectrums with what I've got, but you can still get a lot. And so I'm trying to think if there's one specific. There's something called, oh my gosh, I'm going to mispronounce this. I think it's called Marconian's chain or something like that, but it's literally a chain of galaxies that I believe with this lens, I can get them all into one frame. And there's about 7 of them. But they're going to be small. They're going to be small in my image, but you should be able to make out that that's not a star. That's got shape to it. So that's going to be one of my first ones that I try when I get back up north, because seeing one galaxy in a shot is kind of cool, but seeing 7, well, that's 7 times cool.
That would be very cool.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones. I wish I had that app open. I'd tell you some of them, but there's quite a bit up there. Lots to see.
What are some in terms of like getting like some astro stuff within like the Toronto area, the GTA? Like, what are some good spots for people that are maybe just starting out to kind of take a crack at it?
Well, so believe it or not, I've shot right from my backyard in what's called so light pollution is classified in what's called the Bortle scale, and the lower the number, the lower the light pollution. Starts at 0 in a completely dark sky, or starts at 1, and we're about an 8 or a 9 where I happen to be here. We're in a really, really bright spot. Toronto would literally be a 9. I think they might even classify that as a white zone, I think they call it, when it's literally that much light pollution. But there are ways to do it. And I shot, I mentioned earlier that I shot at the Orion Nebula from my borderline backyard, and it looks just as good as the one that I took in the fall from the Bobcaygeon area, which was a Bortle 4 or Bortle 5. So the things you do, there are things called light pollution filters that block out some of the light that is created by streetlights, and they're surprisingly effective. The thing that's working against us is a lot of cities are changing to LED lighting now.
Yep.
And a lot of these filters aren't quite as effective at getting that light filtered, but
Yeah, because they're designed for a certain color temperature.
you got it. It was sodium lighting, I guess, is what the older lights, and they
get the orange and basically.
Exactly, and they work really well for that. But I've tried it, and it actually, again, it did a pretty good job. But software is key. I find that. So I've mentioned Photoshop and Lightroom and stuff like that, but there's very specific astrophotography software that really nails it. And one program is called Bixs. And what I like so much about it, I mean, it was literally designed for nothing but astrophotography, and it has something in it called background neutralization. It's written by a bunch of geeks because the terms for their different tools in it are just the geekiest things you'd ever hear. But background neutralization does just that. You would take an image of in a light polluted area. Let's say you can make out your target, but the rest is quite a wash. You place little dots all throughout the image on areas that are defined as essentially background noise, with the light polluted part of your photo. It'll actually minus that out of the photo. Wow. And it's incredibly effective. And unfortunately, in light polluted areas, we're somewhat limited to that type of back end processing to extract that information. But very well thought out program, a bit pricey, but it does an amazing job. But I went up to Loretto, which isn't that far from here. I think about a 40-minute drive from Brampton. Yep. And you're going from a Bortle 8 or 9 down to about a 4 or 5 just in that little drive right there. Wow. So if you can get yourself to, I actually went behind a school that is in Loretto, and nice dark area there, and set my tripod up, and I shot Orion from there, the whole constellation, and it turned out great. So
Andre and I have a spot we go to just northwest of Orangeville.
Oh yeah.
Near Grand
That's
Valley.
Actually, there's a website that you can go to, and I want to say it's called lightpollutionmap.com. Okay. And it'll actually show you with color coding the various areas on a map overlay, and it'll show you the different Bortle classes. And it's a great app or a great website to figure out how far do I have to go in which direction to get me to an area that's a lot darker than where I am now. Yes. And that area that you just mentioned, northwest of Orangeville, is actually one of the areas that I was hoping to get to myself because it drops off quite quickly.
Yeah, it's actually really good there.
Yeah.
We'll meet you there on a dark road.
Yeah.
Done. Yeah.
We've got a spot.
Nothing creepy about that. You know what? I would much rather meet there in a dark with a bunch of people, because I tend to do it on my own. And I believe in safety in numbers. I mean, I've always felt pretty safe whenever I've gone out. But the last time that I did that in Loretto, the forest right near the school was filled with coyotes, owls. It was fascinating and terrifying at the same time. So yeah.
Meek wants to know what apps you use to track stars and clarity of the sky at any given time.
There's no Dogecoin in space, Meeks.
There is an app. Forgive me, guys. I'm going to jump on my. So I mentioned Sky Safari as one. Okay. There's another app called. Forgive me, guys. I'll get it real quick here. Isn't that funny? I can't get the name of the app.
Uh-oh.
And you want to trust me to be your astrophotographer. You know what, Bryan, are we able to leave comments afterwards that people can see?
Yep. Yeah, you can post them in the comments to the video. Like you can go back and put them in the comments for sure.
I want to say it's called Clear Outside, and it's an app that actually. Can I do this? Can I do that? Yeah.
Yeah, put up to the camera. Yeah.
Okay. So what this does, this one here.
Jason big here.
Yeah, we're not going to get the focus on it, but what this does essentially, it gives me each day of the week, and it shows me the total amount of cloud, the visibility that you get, the what's called the seeing, which seeing I believe refers to that distortion that I was talking about, the atmospheric distortion. That can vary, and sometimes it's better than some days it's better than other days. So this app will actually show you a forecast of cloud cover, seeing, wind speed, which is another key thing that you want to know with astrophotography, because if your tripod's being bumped around by the wind, your long exposures are going to be terrible. So that's a great app for forecasting. The other one that I mentioned there was Sky Safari. I like that one quite a bit because it really seems to be designed for photographers because of that, being able to overlay your lens size to get an idea of what your image is going to look like. And the other one, Another one that I haven't dove into too much is called Photo Pills, and that's a great photography for all types of photography, but it has some really good planning tools for astro, and it will tell you when the Milky Way is going to rise in a certain part of the sky, and you can literally overlay, I think with augmented reality, a specific spot even, where you could say, I want that church to be in the shot with the moon that's going to rise over there behind it. It's that type of planning app where you can really, you can plan out those shots in advance, and it gives you a really neat interface. I'll be honest, I haven't dived too much into it. I do have it, but I just haven't used it too much yet. But tons of great astrophotography apps out there, and that's on the phone side. And then on the PC side, like I mentioned, PixInsight, really, really highly detailed, advanced app. Registacks is the one that I use for stacking lunar photos. Sequitur is the one that I mentioned there for doing landscape astrophotography, where you want to have land and sky in the scene as well. And oh my gosh, there's so many. I could just keep going on.
All right, we have a question here from Kim. What would the range of aperture? Can you do this? I have a 10 to 20 with a 3.5.
Oh yeah, a 10 to 20. Oh yeah, that would be. Well, this lens here. So this is where it gets a little tricky. But this lens, at the 600 mil that I use on this thing, it limits me to an aperture of 6.3, which isn't that great. I'm not getting a lot of light, but that's where the tracker comes into play. All of a sudden, aperture doesn't matter so much if I can keep that subject locked in place, because then sky's the limit as far as exposure time. But I always
Kim,
say,
you can definitely do stars at 3.5.
Oh yeah. And what I recommend, I hope it's okay to refer to some other YouTubers that have really been helpful, but there's a channel called Nebula Photos. I like to recommend this guy whenever I can. His name is Nico Carver. I like him so much I became a Patreon of his page because he's helped me that much. And he actually does a series that in the thumbnail you'll see it says no tracker, no telescope, no problem. And it's exactly for our situation right here, where you have, let's say, nothing more than a kit lens and an SLR and a tripod, and you want to be able to do this. And what he does is he really boosts up that ISO. So that's how he addresses the light loss with not being able to track or not having a wide aperture. He does high ISOs. So you're going to get grainier images, but he takes you through the post-processing side of it as well. And he'll use programs that are not only payware, but he'll also do freeware programs. Like I think GIMP is one of them that I think is quite well known. And he'll walk you through the whole process from A to Z. It's incredible. So
excellent.
And Astro Backyard is another great one that lots of people I think have probably heard of. He's fantastic, and he's a Canadian as well.
Nice.
Which is really good. Yeah. So yeah, lots of great resources out there.
Do you do like kind of like how-tos on your YouTube channel, like how to like use all this stuff? Because I think it's pretty interesting. Yeah,
my first YouTube video that I did was actually on macro focus stacking, where I did a video on 2 grains of salt. That's what I do in my slow time in the winter, right? I play with salt, but I think it was a pretty cool video though. And then the second one I did was in response to some people. Actually, I'm on a group page on Facebook for this lens, and somebody said, "Hey, show us some of your pictures that people have taken with this lens." Well, every single one was a bird, a fox, and so I threw up Andromeda.
Yeah, and casual. It's a casual.
And it just, I think it was 750 likes later. It was just, it blew everybody's mind. They're like, "Wait a sec, you took that with this lens?" So several people asked me. They said, "Would you be willing to make a YouTube video to show us your setup and talk this through?" So my second video I just uploaded this past weekend, where I actually go through the picture of the setup that I showed you in detail and what each item does. Nice. And then my plan is when I get back up north to do a actual shoot and try to do a video of the image capture itself of one of these targets. So slowly working towards being a content creator.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fascinating. I mean, also as John said, you're a great presenter. I mean, you're able to like explain stuff.
Cool.
Even I can understand it. So
thank you so much, John. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Someone let Bixs know that he's not allowed to ask questions in the comments.
Well,
if he doesn't show up here.
So, Kim said she wants to try this in the Maritimes. Here, Kim.
Oh yeah.
There you go, Kim.
There's a great There's a photographer
Yeah.
I follow on Facebook, and he's from Halifax area, and he takes some stunning pictures. Incredible. And his name's Jason, actually. As
There
well.
you go.
But he's in a Bortle, I want to say a 2 or 3, so fairly dark sky where he's located outside of the city, and spectacular images. And so you draw inspiration, right, from people in the community. So yeah.
Yeah.
Man,
There you go,
we
Kim.
get a
There's
plan.
a photo from the Maritimes.
We got to plan a trip to
Yeah.
Peggy's Cove, man. I
Yes,
miss
we
it.
do.
That's from when Andre and I were there in 2019.
Yeah, that was a stunning
Let's
photo.
do a weekend trip.
A weekend trip.
Yeah, let's go.
Casual, just casual. We'll have to do a show out there.
I'll go for a weekend and I'll stay 3 weeks.
I know, eh?
Yeah. There you go.
But Jason, if you had the chance, would you actually go into space?
Oh, well, I shouldn't say this because I think my family's watching, but yes, I would.
Yeah. They have those like
Yeah.
Do you know what
it is?
Joe man missions out there.
When you're that passionate about something like that, like the opportunity to look back and see the Earth from that distance,
Yeah.
I
That would be
think it would be life altering, and
Oh yeah.
and give
I
you
agree.
a different.
But
I
what
find
gear
that-
would you bring?
What gear? Well, all of it, of course. I don't know. Does a tracking mount work on a space station?
I don't know. Does a tripod work? I don't know.
Yeah, you don't need one, I guess. You just.
I
hands off,
guess. I
right?
don't
Yeah.
know. 4K from actual space.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the astronauts, I think, have taken cameras up there. You see some of them with massive telephoto lenses, and they're just, of course, floating right beside them. And, I think Chris Hadfield was
Chris Hadfield was one of the first guys that really
He was, yeah. He took
really
some great images.
popularized the
Yeah,
space
guy-
photography.
Guy's
Yeah.
a rock- That guy's a Canadian legend.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Canadian legend, that guy.
Yeah.
We should try to get him on the show one day.
We
Now we're
should.
talking.
Make
Now
some
we're-
calls.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll set it up, Paul. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, it's with me. Don't worry about
Okay.
that. Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. I mean,
Cool. Good.
blowing my mind here.
Yeah, I could have brought all the equipment in here and shown you all the little pieces, but I have all my gear more or less contained within a couple of bags. And so that on a clear night, I can literally just move it all outside to the backyard
Grab
and
and
hook
go.
it all up.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, Jason,
Yeah.
the Sky Tracker you use,
Yeah.
is it high end, mid range?
So I would say this is one step up from entry level.
Okay.
The thing you want to, and somebody actually mentioned this on Facebook today. I was having a conversation with a woman on Facebook about Star Trackers because she had mentioned the entry level model and said, I'm thinking of getting this one. And
Okay.
I said, you might, if you can stretch to that next level, what you're going to gain is payload. And the entry level ones, I believe, are typically limited to 5 or 6 pounds. This one
Which
here is
not a
limited.
lot. Yeah.
It's not. And believe it or not, when this lens alone, I think is 6 pounds.
Yep.
And when I throw the tracker and the lens and all the other equipment on there, I believe I'm getting close to 11 pounds or so. And that's getting, I think the payload restriction on this one's about 11 or 12.
Okay.
So I'm there. And I really believe in a little bit of forward compatibility. You want to be able to grow with the equipment.
Yep.
And my next step from this one would be a full-on equatorial mount that would hold a telescope. And that's the long-term goal. I would like to get that eventually. But
And what's
Like
the price point for something like that?
for
That
the
you
one,
have.
this one here, this
The
one,
one that you're using now, yeah.
is about $550.
Oh, that's not bad.
No,
Okay.
last year, I'll tell a very quick story. Last year, I took a picture of Comet Neowise, our visitor that came to see us last year. And
I think everybody took a picture.
I think everybody got one. And I wish I had it handy here to pull up because it was it's on my Instagram as well. But I went for a drive one night when I got up to Bob Cajun on a Friday night, looking for some foreground interest. I managed to get the comet on its own, but now I wanted something in the foreground. And I got a picture of an elm tree, a silhouette of an elm tree in a field with
Oh, Jason, you're in trouble, by the way.
Why? Oh no, Mom.
Oh,
Is that
That's awesome.
my fault? It's my fault.
Oh, I told you
Blame it
guys,
on me.
Mom's watching.
My fault.
I'm going to see if I can pull up that other one as I'm talking, but I went into, I just drove just outside of town and I found this elm tree just in a glimmer of remaining daylight. I was able to see this silhouette of a tree in the field. So I actually had my 100 mil f2.8 with me, my Canon macro lens, but 100 mil is a great focal length for portraits and everything else. And it actually frame this up just how I wanted it. And I managed to get a shot of, let me see if I can get it real quick here as we're talking. I'm going to go fast. I'm going fast. But so what I was getting to was with that shot, there was such an interest in that community in Bobcaygeon that quite a few people purchased the print, which was really, really nice. And with that money that I raised, now I have pulled it up, so I'm going to share the screen again, Brian.
Yep, go for it.
Share screen. Here we go. Hopefully it won't flicker on us. There we go. So this was at about 10 o'clock at night. This was again a long exposure. With this one, I think because it was 100 millimeter focal length, I was limited to about 5 seconds. Think about that 500 rule again.
Yep.
But I captured again, I think it was 12 to 15 images, which I used Sequitur to blend because the night sky, of course, was changing while my foreground was staying fixed. So it did a great job in blending it together. Now, I managed to, like I said, there's such a great interest in Bobcaygeon. So many people were interested in that print that I sold quite a few. I took the money from the sale of that print and I bought myself a mount. So
beautiful.
So kind of reinvesting it back into the hobby, right? And just so that I can create more. But that was a great experience last year, seeing Comet Neowise first off with the naked eye, then getting a few pictures of it just to say I got it, and then actually getting one like that. It was really cool. Yeah.
Excellent.
So that's and that little bit of light along the horizon there was actually the remaining daylight. Again, with a long exposure, it amps everything up, right?
Yep.
So that
was probably in July.
That was yes, it was. Yeah.
Yep.
I want to say July. I want to say July 12th or so, I believe, is when I got that one. Yeah.
Guess
very
we
cool.
should go to Bobcaygeon.
Bobcaygeon is awesome.
Bobcaygeon, hey, why not?
Yeah. Great song.
Tragically Hip liked it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%. What's one thing that you don't like about Astro? Is there something that you don't like about it?
Sure. All the mistakes that I make. So
all the mistakes.
So it's so funny. So there's so many things to set up. So that picture I showed you earlier of that setup, I go out about an hour before sunset and start getting things ready, all the connections and making sure that I have a rough, polar alignment type of thing in the general direction of where Polaris is going to be. And I've had nights where I've stood there and my family's had to listen to me because I've lost 45 minutes to an hour because the tracking won't work. And then it dawns on me that to do the polar alignment, you have to look up through this scope and the connections are right about here. And when I needed to do the polar alignment, I disconnected this one just long enough for me to do the polar alignment. Well, guess what? I never plugged it back in. So I lost an hour of imaging to a disconnected cable. I've done that twice now. I've left the Botnov mask on the front of the lens. And but you know what? It's all part of the learning experience. Right?
It's a learning process.
Yeah, it's all good. I would say the only thing, adding the auto guiding and stuff has really, really improved the hobby for me, I think, because I have a lot more keepers now, where I used to have to discard a lot of the images because of something bumping it, a little bit of wind. The auto tracking or the auto guiding does an amazing job of refining that process and just getting more keepers. So excellent. I just wish we had more clear nights.
Yes.
So don't get into astrophotography and nothing else because it's just not going to keep you interested.
You need another niche, another style.
It got to be diverse. Yeah. So I call it Critters to Cosmos. That's
there we go.
Critters to Cosmos.
Critters to Cosmos.
Great.
And we'll have you back for a critter show.
Yeah, that's my passion, right? That sums it all up, guys.
All right, guys.
So my question,
coming up on 8:30 here. Oh, you have a question?
One last question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just thinking. So, what would be if anybody wants to start astrophotography and they can afford one lens?
Yeah.
What would be your recommended?
Oh man,
lens.
You know what? I love this lens. So this Rokinon is actually reasonably priced as far as lenses are concerned. I want to say this was maybe $400, $450, something like that.
Actually, excellent pricing.
It wasn't a lot, and the reason being is because it's an all manual lens. There's no autofocus. Your aperture adjustment is old school, right? I think that's how they kept the cost down on this, but the glass is excellent. And for doing wide angle landscape astrophotography, I'd probably suggest that one, because it really introduces you to, oh my gosh, you can do so much with it. You can get Milky Way, you can get great landscape shots in the foreground. I think it's a good place to start. Deep sky will frustrate you, I think, if you started with that, because your targets are harder to obtain. I think starting with something like that is good. Yeah. But 50 mil is a great focal length. If you happen to have a kit lens that is an 18 to 55, which is a pretty common kit lens for a lot of people, use what you've got. That's what I say. Try that first. Learn how to do long exposures first. Learn how to refine, how to do your setup, how to use your, sounds silly, but your shutter release, your 10-second timer. Yeah. Get good at not introducing camera shake. Things like that. I say start there. That would be my tip. Yeah.
Patricia wants to know what the lens is.
It's a Rokinon.
Yeah. So Rokinon, Rokinon, and it's a 14 millimeter f2.8 aperture lens. And this is an EF mount version for the EOS R. I do use the adapter on the EOS R. So I own no RF lenses whatsoever. I haven't really gotten into the RF mount. I'm really content with my EF lenses. They're fantastic. So I don't feel any need to pay double the price for that new technology. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jason, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much. I hope I didn't talk too much, guys. Thank you so much.
No, that's great, man.
Perfect.
It was perfect.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me on. This was great.
Evans, any final thoughts from you? Quick.
I've learned a lot today.
There's an echo.
Yeah, Evans has a really
we have an echo from your
don't worry.
universe.
Oh, there we go.
Fine. You guys can go without me. Oh, it's fine now?
Yeah, it's fine now.
Yeah.
There you go.
I joined the Canon world today, so
all
right.
I'm having my camera just went off and I just quickly changed the battery.
It went off as you're asking about the lens.
Yep.
Sorry, did you say you just went Canon today? Is that what you said?
Well, yeah, I'm trying out
SL3.
SR3 just for my live streams, because
Oh,
I've
cool.
always used my Black Magic for live streaming.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, cool.
But I'm tired of having to color grade every time I go live.
Right. Well, I'm a Canon fanboy through and through, and they won't. You'd have to pry it from my cold dead hands.
Yeah, I started off shooting Canon. I shot Canon for a couple of years, then I switched to Sony.
Yep.
I'm not going back to Canon, but I just need something for my live streams.
We'll get you back.
Andre and I are both Canon shooters too. So.
Yeah.
It's been a fun night. I've learned a lot.
Good.
I've never really thought about doing a lot of astrophotography. I think I went out with Bryan and Andrea once at night, shot the Milky Way.
Yeah.
But from what you've just shown me, I basically have a lot of stuff.
That goes back.
Yeah. I'm not sure why, but I basically have a lot of stuff to get started with it. I pretty much have wide angle lenses. I have some, so I might as well just try it out from time to time. But it's been very informative tonight.
Throw your camera and lens on a tripod and aim it at the night sky. And I say dial in 30 seconds if that's your longest exposure. Go with around ISO 1000 to 1600, somewhere in there, wide open aperture, and take a shot and see what you get. See what you get.
Personally, I'm good with long exposures. I love long exposures for landscapes and anything with water. I've been doing long exposures a lot, but now I got to try to figure it and apply it to night photography.
It's the same. I mean, you're doing all the right stuff because you know the importance of not having camera shake. You know about remote shutters. You know about all that stuff. So the only difference is time of day and where you're aiming it.
Yeah.
We'll go meet up on a back road again, Evans.
Yep.
I would love to join you guys once we're able to again. I'd love to do that. Yeah.
For sure. Andre, final thoughts, quick.
Jason, thanks for coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Thanks, guys.
For me, I've just dabbled, playing with like long exposure, get the star trails, and I've never even attempted to go nebulas and all that stuff, but I love seeing the images though. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Paul, final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think you absolutely crushed this presentation.
Good.
Like John said, you're like a really good presenter. So
thank you.
Huge thank you. And I really like, when you said that, what kind of motivates you is like, doing photography is like therapy, which I totally agree with. Like, it doesn't matter the style or the niche. Like, if you're out shooting, whatever it is, like, you just feel good, right? Because you're doing something creatively, you're focusing on something, especially like during these crazy times.
Yeah.
So I think that applies to like all styles. And I took some like astro shots when I went to Iceland, but I'm just gonna like, I think I'm just gonna delete them now. They're good. They're not good.
Well, I appreciate the kind words and the I've used this term before, and I have to admit I stole it shamelessly. I've heard someone else say it, but when you hear people talk about your images and how much they like them, I always consider that spiritual currency. You're not selling that print, but someone's showing you that it's connected to them in some way. And I think that's what I find more rewarding about photography than anything else. I'm not a professional photographer. I don't get paid to do what I do, except occasionally when I sell individual prints. But hearing people that like them, that's awesome. Yeah.
It's about the group, right? It's about the community.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on behalf of all of us, I think I'll say thank you, Jason, for joining the show.
And Jason's coming back for macro sometimes.
Yeah, we'll have Jason back for macro. I'll set it up with him sometime in the future.
I got lots to talk about.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
The macro will be great.
Sorry. I had to do it.
Perfect.
Hopefully you're not in trouble, Jason, with your mother.
To throw myself a small plug, 10 minutes
on
my channel. My EFM 22mm review is going live in
10 minutes.
In a couple of minutes. So for all you M mount fans, it's actually the lens I'm using to live stream with here. 22mm f2, $250 lens. Find out about it.
Yep.
You know what?
That's it. Thank you everybody for watching.
Yeah, perfect.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Awesome.
Whoever's channel we do that on. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Great evening.
Thank you again, guys. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Jason.
Good night.
Bye-bye.